All right. Let's see if I can get my slides up too. There we go. Let's play a game. There we go. Which profession is this? I'm not going to wait for a response. Obviously, it's a doctor, but all of these people are men or white people. How about this one? It's engineer. And again, I think in this picture, there's exclusively men. How about this one? This is a fast food worker. We see a large variety of people of color, and I don't think a single white person in this entire picture. How about this one? This is house worker. All women, all racialized, almost exclusively Asian. How about this one? This is janitor. Again, we see a heavy skew towards racialized people, people of color, in this case, towards like South America. Here we have lawyer, or no, I think it's judge, heavily skewed towards white men that are older. This is politician. Here we see that politicians apparently only exist in the United States of America and are almost exclusively white men. And this is social worker, mostly women and people of color. And finally, we have teacher, again, mostly women and people of color. These pictures were all generated by Stable Diffusion. And there's a fascinating article you can go look up at Bloomberg that goes through the research behind those images that shows how Stable Diffusion and other image generating applications massively amplify the stereotypes and biases that exist in our language and in our culture, to the point where if you ask for something like make a picture of a lawyer, you're almost guaranteed to get a white man. While if you say give me a picture of a janitor or fast food worker, you're almost guaranteed to get a person of color of some sort. If you say give me a picture of a social worker, you're almost guaranteed to get a person of color who is also a woman. This is the underlying premise that we work inside. So my talk today is called The Ethics of AI, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bots. What I want to do is go through 3 stages in this talk. First off, what is AI? Not in like, how does it work, but how do we talk about it? The second is AI ethical? And the third one, can I use AI? So let's talk about what AI is. AI is a scientific term that in the realm of people who work with AI is understood for the technology underlying it, but in the understanding in the public is understood through the lens of science fiction. And that's why when we say AI, the first thing people think of is things like Skynet or HAL or iRobot. And this bleeds into how we talk about AI. So you'll remember earlier this year, a Google engineer, or late last year, a Google engineer tried to hire a lawyer to represent a Google AI because he felt that the AI was sentient. After the release of ChatGPT, there have been tons of stories about how ChatGPT is lying to people or gaslighting them or trying to trick them into doing things like divorcing their wife. The problem here is that the language we use to talk about AI tricks us into thinking about AI as if science fiction was real, which is not. The prevailing understanding we have of AI as an entity that acts on its own behalf is fundamental to our understanding of how we deal with these tools, and it is pure science fiction. This title here, Microsoft's Bing is an emotionally manipulative liar, is fundamentally untrue because there is no Bing. There is no agent that can be manipulative or can be a liar. But because AIs, we perceive AIs as things like us, because they talk like us, we think of them as versions of us. That's how, like, we've known this for years. This is an article from 2013 about research into how people have empathy for robots, even though they are robots. Disney exploits this to great success. If you've ever seen the lamp commercial for IKEA, you will know this. People feel really bad about the lamp. Don't feel bad about the lamp. it has no feelings, and the new one is much better. So there is no conscious thinking and acting agent inside our current AI systems, and there probably will never be. So all of these stories you hear about how there's going to be this super intelligent AI that's going to be a big danger is mostly marketing hype to stay in the news. It's also very unrealistic to what these systems are, and the people who say those things know how unrealistic it is. The challenge that we're facing as people is that large language models like ChatGPT have direct access to our API, because language is the API of humanity. Now, we can see that because a lot of people talk about how they think large language models may be sentient, like ChatGPT is almost sentient or close to sentient or has sparks of sentience. But no one claims that DALL-E is sentient, even though it's the same system. Because DALL-E doesn't speak in words, it speaks in images. And we don't correlate images with sentience in the same way. Now, the AI systems today are large language models. So they are software, nothing more, nothing less. And we really shouldn't call them AI because they're not artificial intelligence at all. They are pattern repetition systems. They are language construct generators. They are bias amplification machines. And that's how they work. When you put a prompt into an AI system, it finds data. Now, it finds patterns in whatever data it was trained on and what data we feed them. Then it repeats those patterns back to us like a mirror. And it does this far more effectively than a human. And because it does it more effectively than we can comprehend, it appears to us as magic, even though it's just software. And that leads to all these weird things, right? Like, now that we have AI, like you saw in the previous talk, these AI systems can write code better than us, simply, or faster than us, simply because they are built on models, and code is language, and therefore it's able to repeat the language that we write in our code back to us. But what you'll discover is if you work with coding applications in AI, they are very old. They give you code that is old patterns, because the old patterns are better documented in the web and more prevalent on the web. So you have to force them if you want them to surface newer patterns, because they're just repeating the most popular patterns that exist. We also have things like the usage of these tools. Like, once you feed it information about, say, a likeness of a person, they can imitate the likeness of that person, but they can't really construct new people that are believable. I think the best example we see of how language models work is actually through the new Photoshop AI, because you see how you input a human language instruction, and then the system then translates that into machine understandable code that then gets passed over to an AI image generator that then does something to the images. So there's this lack of willingness to accept that this is software. It is not sentience. There's no intelligence behind it. And but if we actually go try and make it sound intelligent, you very quickly realize it's not. I encourage you to go buy one of the AI written books on Amazon, one of the cheap ones, just to see how profoundly crappy they are. Because like, you read it and you go, this is not written by a human, because humans would never write like this, because it's too boring and crappy. Now, I should preface all this by saying, number one, I use AI all the time in my work, and I have for years. AI is an integral part of my work. Number two, when I say all this, I'm saying it as an educator and an expert at tech ethics. So everything I say here has to be seen in the context of that frame. Like, I'm an educator, I'm educating you about this stuff, and I'm providing you educational information. That is to say, I am not speaking on behalf of the company I work for, nor my wife, nor my son, nor his pet pig, nor anything else. This is my educational content to you. What I want you to walk away from this is, number one, you won't be replaced by an AI in your job. Instead, you will be replaced by someone using AI in the job that you used to do. So learning how AIs work and how to work with them has become essential to your work in the future. And in the future, as in like 2 weeks from now, a month from now, a year from now, 6 years from now, we will all be working with AI, because it will be entirely integrated into our lives. I like to point to this picture. This is me in 2009 doing the job of 6 people in a TV production studio. What happened was we were transitioning a radio show onto television. And instead of going out and hiring a full production crew, they hired me to do it, even though I had no professional training on doing TV production at all. And I literally did the job of 6 people for 4 years. This is what AI is. It gives you, like, technology advancement gives you the capability of doing things that previously had to be done by people. And in the process, you're lowering the necessary skills to be able to do things and offloading a lot of the difficult skills to computer systems, to hardware, to software. This is nothing new. If we go look back at the history of the term mechanic, you'll see that in the the late 1800s, early 1900s, or the early 20th century, we very rapidly transitioned from blacksmithing to machining to horses to cars. And in that process, the blacksmiths first transitioned from doing blacksmithing work to doing more mechanical work because machines were taking over their jobs. And the first thing they did was they became farriers, so they would shoe horses. But then over time, when people started buying cars and had troubles with the cars, they would be like, who fixes my vehicle? And their old vehicle was a horse. So then they went, okay, so the mechanic down the street can fix my horse. So then they can probably fix my car too. And only the blacksmiths that then transitioned over into becoming car mechanics actually survived in their profession. That's basically what's happening here. AI takes over our hard or brute force or rote software skills, the same way robots took over our hard or brute force and mechanical skills. For me, I found the best way to think about AI and the ethical implications of using AI is to realize that AIs are 2 things, and they can be used in 2 different ways. They are either tools that do things. So when you go talk to ChatGPT and you say, summarize this talk, or remove an apple from an image, or build me an app or something like that, you're using it as a tool in the same way that Photoshop is a tool. They are also materials that you build into things, so you work with them. Say you want to add chat to an app, or add auto captioning to a video, or streamline some sort of process using AI. You are building AI into your application as a material, and then your user uses the AI as a tool. Now, in all of this, remember, when we think of something as magical or sacred or sentient, we give it way too much respect. What you need to build for yourself is a healthy disrespect for technology, including AI. If we give reverence to our technology, we let the technology make decisions on our behalf, and we cannot do that. So this brings us to part number 2. Is AI ethical? First, I need to point this out. There is a valid question to ask, can any work be ethical in a capitalist system? Because AI is very much the current, most extreme extension of capitalism that we have. If you're interested in that question, I highly recommend this book called Design After Capitalism, written by Matthew Wazinski. It's a huge textbook. It is absolutely fascinating. And it shows us that it's possible for us to build a future beyond capitalism and design a future beyond capitalism that actually works. I'm not going to go into great detail on that book here. AI ethics is not a new thing that arose now that we have AI. AI ethics is an academic field that predates ChatGPT by decades. There are people that have doctorates in AI ethics. There's a myriad of material published. When AI people talk about how we need to understand the harms of AI, they are flat out lying, because we fully understand the harms of AI already, because this has been explored for decades. Since the 1960s, we have been doing studies on this. AI ethics have already identified many of the potential harms caused by AI, including algorithmic bias, inequity, illusion of neutrality, misalignment issues, hallucinations. The list just goes on endlessly. These are extremely well documented, extremely well understood, and are all prevalent in the current AI systems that we have. For example, the AI systems that we currently use are heavily biased in favor of the English language. They are heavily biased in favor of Western culture, specifically American Western culture, and they persist and promote American ideals and worldviews. So that means if you sit anywhere outside the United States, by using these AI systems, you are fed American ideals and an American worldview and information about the world in the context seen from America. There's also inequity in access around these AI systems. Your access to them depends on where you are physically in the world, what kind of politics happen in your country or your region, what financial restraints you have and your country has, what hardware and infrastructure is available to you, what tech literacy you have yourself, and what language you use. All of these things impact your ability to even use these things. And as designers, we need to consider those things in building these tools, because our focus needs to be on making equitable solutions for everyone. AIs are also non-deterministic APIs. I think it's the first real non-deterministic API we've ever had on a wide scale. They are stochastic parrots. They just repeat language back to us and pretend, and we perceive it as if it's real language, but it's actually just structured data put together to look like language. They are language constructs. They are not knowledge bases, but they behave like knowledge bases. So we tend to think we can ask them questions. But when we do, we're not actually asking them, we're not asking someone knowledgeable a question. They're just barfing up information from their data set. And it may be correct or it may be completely wrong. And they don't know any better because there is no they. They have limited context windows. So if you talk to an AI for a long time, it'll start forgetting what you said earlier on because it doesn't have that much space in its context window. So that's why they start rambling and saying weird things that make no sense. And finally, they're highly susceptible to jailbreaks, either intentional or unintentional. So a user can easily make the AI take a trip into the forest and do weird things and not be aware that that's happening. The ethical concerns around AI generally are actually concerns around humans and how humans use AIs. Here's an example of that. So we have image AIs, right? Image AIs are amazing at making images that can be really fascinating. These are some images that Ethan Mollick made that are of a cute invasion of the United States of America. They are incredibly photorealistic and really compelling to watch. And this is cool. You look at that and go, wow, amazing capabilities. And then you realize that people use this for disinformation. There was the huge thing about a bomb at the Pentagon that was a fraud. And people also use it for exploitation and sexual abuse online. Of course, this is not a new problem. This article is from 2019. But now it's way worse because you can't use it. So it's about humans as much as it is about the AI. And I want to talk about the human aspect of this because tech ethics is mainly about the capabilities that we modify in our users and in the world. So when you do anything in design, you really need to ask yourself, what capabilities do I have now, and how do I use those capabilities ethically? And the capabilities now are extended with AI. And then from there comes the question, how do we as a society regulate these new capabilities to ensure that they are used in a way that furthers humanity, that it is equitable, that is just and fair, and all these other things? And in that question comes the question, from whose work did these capabilities manifest? Are they notified? Were they asked for permission? Were they credited? Were they remunerated? And the answer to all of these questions when it comes to AI is no. All these AI systems were trained on our data without our knowledge, without our consent, and without our participation, and we get no value out of it in return. So this is, in a very real sense, the most extreme version of surveillance capitalism that we have right now. All of that is a backdrop for what we're working with. And just to bring it to its central core, in the age of surveillance capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff asks these three questions that she says you have to ask for all new technology, which is, who knows, who decides, and who decides who decides? And these are questions that we really need to ask ourselves as these AI technologies get rolled out in the world. Who knows what these technologies do? Who decides whether or not these technologies are things that we're going to be using? And who decides who decides? Because these are questions that if we can find answers to, we can actually do something about. So can any work be ethical in a capitalist system? The answer is yes, but only if we do our work using ethical principles and practice, which brings us to, can I use AI in my work? I'll remind you, you don't get replaced by an AI, you get replaced by someone who uses AI. And there is no putting the AI cat into the tech bag, even though they sell bags for cats. But designers build the future for users and themselves. Design is a highly political craft. And whenever we do any kind of design decision, we are actively making decisions about our users, about what they can and cannot do, and what capabilities they have in their life and in their community. So we have an enormous ethical responsibility towards our users. The job of a designer is to give people the necessary capabilities to be and do what they have reason to value in their lives and their communities. Your responsibility is to the end user to make their lives better in their context, on their terms, with their agency and their autonomy intact. So tech ethics is about capabilities. And that becomes a challenge when we know that AI has deep-rooted ethical issues. So how do we use that in our practice in an ethical way? Well, the simple answer is consider your impact. And this has actually become like a brand for all the companies that use AI, including the company I work for. And it falls under the umbrella responsible AI. Use AI responsibly. And then we can have a conversation about what responsible means. Basically, you ask yourself, who does whatever you're doing impact? And the answer is, it impacts the human end user, the person interacting with the thing you designed. It impacts their community and their surroundings. It impacts the world, and it impacts your profession. If you do something, you are telling every other person in your profession, this is OK to do. So you have to carefully consider, if I do this, do I want every other person to do the same thing? And what will happen to the world if I do that? These stories about how AI is supplanting people in their work are prevalent and will continue to be prevalent because it is actually happening, mostly due to capitalism. A lot of bosses and a lot of companies just see that AI is cheaper than human labor, so therefore we're going to do AI instead. I think that that's going to bounce back because it turns out that AI can't do a lot of these things very well. We've already seen examples of companies firing a bunch of people, replacing them with AI, and then having to rehire everyone because the AI simply couldn't do the job at the level necessary. But in the United States, AI eliminated nearly 4,000 jobs in May. So who is impacted the most by this? Precariously employed people, underserved communities, historically marginalized, excluded, and harmed communities, and the global South, as is always the case. And as designers, we have to consider this. We have to actively work to make sure that these people in particular are not harmed by the decisions we make as we include AI in our work. And that includes looking at, if I have access to an AI tool that my peers do not have access to, I have a leg up on them, but I'm also taking opportunities away from them and I'm creating an unfair marketplace for people to work in. So how do we do this in a structured way that actually works without me going into a 6-hour lecture on ethics? Well, here are some principles that you can follow to make your work with AI more responsible. The first one is to know your tools and your materials. These are the AI tools you either use yourself or build into your stuff. And when I say know them, I mean know them deeply. Understand how they work. Understand what happens when people use them, understand their borders and edges and what happens when things go wrong, understand where they came from, understand the biases that they contain, know how to filter biases, know how to make sure the user doesn't accidentally walk the AI off into the forest to do weird things. Keep them on track the whole time. Second, promote fairness and inclusion. In using AI, you are taking advantage of technology that's not available to everyone, and it's your job to make sure that the user is not in any way disadvantaged by your use of AI, and that your community is not disadvantaged by your use of AI. If the AI is supplanting human work, that is a problem that you need to address in some way, because we can't let people get fired simply because technology exists, because that technology isn't actually a good replacement for humans. Uphold trust, safety, and privacy. Make sure that whenever you use AI, you do it in a way that is trustworthy, so people know that you are using it in ways that benefit them and that you are taking their rights into consideration. Make sure it's safe for your users to use it, that the data doesn't leak anywhere, that it doesn't get let off, that they don't get bad information, and make sure that their privacy is preserved throughout by employing design, the privacy by design. And go buy Rachel Byrne's book about privacy, because it's essential reading for all designers. Be transparent and accountable about your use of AI. Tell people when you're using it, show people how you're using it, tell people how that use is impacted, and hold yourself accountable. So if something goes wrong, fix it and be public about what went wrong, how you fixed it, and how you're going to prevent things like that from happening in the future. Preserve the user's autonomy and agency. Don't make decisions on behalf of the user. It's very easy for designers to think, I can make this decision on behalf of the user. But especially when it comes to things like AI that gives the user new capabilities, do not make decisions on behalf of the user about what they can and cannot do, unless you're making decisions about how to prevent the user from accidentally doing harm to themselves or someone else. And as much as possible, ensure that the user has the autonomy and agency to decide whether they want to use these tools or not, whether they want to contribute, whether they want to be part of this experience or not, and give them other ways of doing the things that the AI is doing for them. And finally, value human work over AI work. This is going to become really hard for all of us, that we'll see AI be able to take over a lot of jobs from people. And in that, we always have to ask our question, is it actually worth it for us, for the community we live in, and for society to save a little bit of money to replace a human's job with an AI? Because work, if we divorce it from capitalism and say work is just how people spend their time, work actually has value in and of itself. If you're in a job you like, a job that gives you meaning, being replaced by an AI is extremely harmful to you. And then, of course, in addition, we have the whole economic aspect that people rely on their jobs to do things. If you go look at Sam Altman from OpenAI, he keeps talking about this idea that in the future, we won't need to work because AIs will be able to do most of our jobs. In that conversation, he implies that somehow society will just pay people, that we will no longer need to have jobs to get paid. But in the real capitalist world, that is not going to happen. Instead, people are going to get fired and not have jobs available to them unless they are the most remedial jobs where cheap human labor is cheaper than AI. So as we design things with AI, we need to keep in mind that we are building a future, and we need to ensure that we preserve the value of human work in doing so. This also comes with practice. We have to change the way we practice our craft. And the start of that starts with educating both yourself and your peers about how to use these tools and the impact of using these tools on users, on society, on the world, and on yourself. The second part is educating your representatives, because how AI will impact our world depends largely on how our politicians decide how they will regulate the environment. And right now, the only people who are talking to our elected representatives about how to regulate AI are the people who are building the AI. And they have a very specific view of how the world should look in the future. That view doesn't always correspond with the way that we think the world should look in our future. And it is your job as a subject matter expert, as a person who works in the field of AI, to go and talk to your elected representatives about how the technology works, how it impacts the world, and what we can do with it. Claim ownership of your own work. As we've seen, these systems have been trained on the data we put on the internet. As we put more data on the internet, we are forced to be aware of where that data goes. And you can go to these systems and actively opt out if you don't want your data to end up as training data. But you need to educate yourself on how to do that, because it depends on the system and who collects the data. But you can. And if you want to exclude your data, whatever form it takes, from this training, graphics, websites, texts, whatever, you can. Just go and actually do it. Demand accountability from everyone involved. The clients you work for, your company, the legislators that regulate AI systems, the companies that make the AI systems, the company that collect data around the AI systems, and your peers. Everyone has to be held accountable for their work, because if we don't hold ourselves accountable, then bad things happen and no one does anything about it. Build livable futures for everyone. This is our job as designers, to build livable futures. And with AI, we have the capabilities to do way more than we could before. And we can give our users new capabilities to build better futures for themselves. But that only happens if we squarely focus on that as our primary goal. Ask our clients, when we do this, are we actively building a livable, better future for our customers, or are we just doing things to save money or make more money from them? that is actually your job as a designer. And finally, this is an extremely circular argument. Do ethical work. Ethics is a practice. It's not a checklist. It's a way of working. And reminding yourself every day that you are responsible for doing ethical work is part of that practice. Now, the way technology works, and especially the way that online technology works, is by so-called paving the cow paths. We look at how people are using technology, and then we build technology around the use. The web evolved this way. Like jQuery led to an evolution in JavaScript. Sass and less led to an evolution in CSS, and so on. Right now, we are laying down the cow paths of AI by how we use AI systems. In fact, ChatGPT is a research project from OpenAI to see how people would use a chat agent so that they can build tools around it. So that means as we use AI, we are not only using helpful tools, we are actively laying down the cow paths that will eventually be paved around this technology. So we have to very carefully think, do I actually want this to be the way the things should be done in the future? Or can I think of a better way of doing things? Everything you do now with AI, every blog post you write, every video you make, every example you put out into the world is a cow path other people will follow. And if it's popular enough, it will become a paved cow path and the default way of doing things. So you have enormous power and responsibility here to lay down those cow paths. Now, the future, our future, is being decided right now by powerful rich men in California. That is how things are happening. But they are actively lobbying the EU right now to change the laws. And at the same time, experts say that ethical AI will not be the norm in the next decade because there's too much money at stake. And people are too focused on getting the money and not focused enough on the ethical component. You have a voice in this as a designer. You are right there on the ground working. And you can implement ethics into your AI work in a way and do your AI work responsibly in a way that guides the entire community towards using this in ways that benefit everyone. And just so you understand where we are right now, Stanford did a study where they looked at all the available AI systems and compared them to the draft EU AI Act. Not a single one passed. So the Draft EU Act is meant to protect users from AI harms. 0 of the current AI systems we have pass that test. And the AI companies are then saying, the test is wrong. And the EU is saying, no, you need to do better. And that battle is currently taking shape, which means you have direct influence over the future of what our world looks like and how we work with AI. At the same time, other jurisdictions are going the opposite direction. In Japan, they've decided that copyright doesn't apply to AI training, meaning if you put something on the internet and someone uses that to train their AI, and then later that AI duplicates your work, you have no claim. Those two things are as polar opposites as you can get. And we are moving towards a future in which jurisdictions will have very different attitudes towards AI and will likely see different availability of AIs depending on where you are in the world. And again, all of this will be influenced by your work and how you do it, which is why the number 2 item on this list, educate your representatives, is so important. Teach yourself how these systems work and how you want them to be used. Go talk to your peers, and then go to your elected representatives and talk to them about AI, because they truly do not know enough to make good decisions. And the only people who are currently talking to them are the people that are making money from these systems. The AI revolution has already happened, and it happened before the powerful had times to lay their plans. The AI revolution happened like 5 or 10 years ahead of schedule. So the grand scheme doesn't really exist yet. And everyone is panicking to come up with a plan for everything. And that means this is our opportunity as people in the world to help co-design our future with AI. So as you do so, forgive yourself in advance for the mistakes you'll make on your journey to making ethics part of your practice. You can do this, and we are all in this together. I should put like a thank you slide at the end.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you so
Or
much, Morten.
maybe sorry.
No, that's fine. I think it's the reason why I think it's important to have sessions like that, and why it's been such a pleasure to have you here, is because I think in many ways frankly, I think just we're just getting so excited about things, and it's like good things, bad things, doesn't matter, but we're just getting so excited about all those things that are happening around, and we just start playing with them. And it's only later, and it's always kind of like that, I feel. It's only
Mhm.
later when we actually realize, oh, hold on, let's think for a moment about what we're doing exactly here. And so I think like maybe it's actually a time right now, it's just the right time to actually start thinking about what exactly we are doing here. And that
Mhm.
kind of fits in nicely into I just want to bring one question before we go in the panel. Uh, I've been having these conversations with people who are spending a bit of time with AI, around AI. Also, kind of looking into what specifically has been done on the level of European Parliament in terms of AI Act and all. And I hear from many people, like something that I've heard before. It's something like, well, the Pandora box has been opened already.
Mhm.
You cannot put it back now. So good luck regulating it. And there is this kind of almost, no, seriously, there is this like
Yeah,
there's this kind of ongoing joke, right? So
it's an
every different region,
inevitablism,
yeah, like stuff like that,
right?
right? Eventually, you get to this point where, well, America, like you look at the United States, great, succeeding in startups, right? You look in South
Mhm.
America, succeeding in artistic, like design, and they're kind of really booming in that. You look into China, well, succeeding in economics, if you like. You look in Japan, succeeding in efficiency, and Europe, succeeding in regulation, right?
Yep.
So, do you think like that actually the way of protecting people from the bad impact of technology, of AI technology, will first land in Europe? Does it even have a chance to properly land in Europe? And what does it even mean?
Um, I think, I mean, the current proposed, like the draft AI legislation in Europe, is by far the strictest regulation that exists of any jurisdiction. Like they have really gone and said, look, we don't trust technologists to do this properly. So we're going to learn from the past 30 years. Like we failed to regulate surveillance capitalism and it
Right.
destroyed democracy globally. We failed to regulate the banking sector. It destroyed the economy globally, right? So the EU is doing the EU legislators are doing the thing that happens when an industry doesn't act responsibly. And that is they overreact and they over regulate. The very big challenge that we have right now is every other industry that directly impacts the lives of people, medicine or any kind of healthcare, any kind of engineering, any kind of banking, any kind of legal, like everything that has anything to do with the impact of human lives, self-regulates and then makes lawmakers take the self-regulation and make it into law. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how it usually works, right? Doctors create ethical rules and frameworks, and then they go to the legislators and say, make this a law. Engineers do the same thing. They said, like, here's our framework, create a law around this so that the government governs it and it's easier for us to control it. The tech sector and the design sector, very specifically, has not done that work. They've actively refused to do that work. And part of it is because there's this perception that if you have any kind of regulation or any kind of restriction around things, it quells the creative
Right.
fires, right? And
Exactly.
the other part is that a lot of people who work in the tech and design industry are self-taught. There's no, like if you're an engineer, you need to get a classification, you need to get certification, you are under control by people can hold you accountable. In design, you can go learn it
You can become
yourself
a
and do
designer
work.
today, basically, right?
So
So
there's no
you don't need a
certification
diploma for it or
system,
something, right?
and no one can take your job away if you're breaking the rules, right? So because we don't have legislation and regulation, and because our industry actively resists having it, and because we can prove that the work that we've done as a tech community has harmed society through, for example, surveillance capitalism, the lawmakers have gone and said, if you're not going to do this job, we're going to do it for you. And we're going to do it in a very heavy-handed way because we don't trust you. So we, as an industry, have a huge job to do to make people trust our work. And then once we've done that, we can go and say, look, now that you trust us, here's how we think we should be doing things, right? And what's happening now with the EU, the America or the US and Asia is the EU is going full on regulation. America is saying we can't do any regulation because then we lose to China. And Asia is going, this is great. There's lots of money here. We can sell this technology to Europe and Europe and the United States, right? So there are three completely different ways of dealing with the problem. And the only real functional way of moving forward is if everyone works together. But due to political ideology, that probably won't happen. So then it's up to us as practitioners to figure out how to do this in a responsible way, being aware the whole time that at any time, new regulation might occur that will take our capabilities away or make it so that you can't do certain things in certain jurisdictions, right? So it's really, the globalism is complicated because different regions of the globe have different policies and different ethics, and they will apply them differently.
Right, and just to kind of build up on that, so do you see it's almost inevitable that at some point in US and all over we will end up with some sort of regulation? And what needs to happen for this to take action, to kind of to become reality? Or are we just going to go fly mode, like free, like freestyle mode, and like whatever happens first, and then if we need to regulate, then we will? It's kind of seems like this is an ongoing journey at the moment in the US.
Yeah. If I put on my futurist hat for a second, I think we'll see the EU will implement legislation probably next year. It will be extremely stringent. It will result in a bunch of features being turned off on a lot of systems. The US will implement some similar legislation at some point in the near future, in the next couple of years. This is highly dependent on the election. That legislation will be less restrictive on the companies, but will be very heavily focused on how people use, like how the data can be exploited, right? Like this is basically the TikTok ban conversation, right? Imagine the TikTok ban conversation, but for all AI. There will be a lot of panicking around, can AI be used by external nefarious actors to manipulate people, basically? And a lot of the legislation from there will be based on fear and politics more than it is based on what the rights of the end user. And so far, we can't really talk about China because China has its own black box. But what we've seen from Asia so far, like Japan, Korea, so on, is that they are leaning more in the direction of this is inevitable. We need to just align with whatever happens in the markets we sell to. So there'll be different approaches to Europe and the Americas. So likely we will see like the Americas will be one type of legislation, Europe will be a different kind of legislation, and we'll have different services depending on where you are in the world. So
probably shouldn't be surprised that at some point we will see this beautiful notes on websites saying, well, this service is not available in your country.
That's probably we already are. I mean, I'm in Canada. Yes. I don't have Bard. Right?
Okay, really?
Bard is not available in Canada. So Google Bard is available in the United States and a bunch of European countries, but not here.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, well, here we go.
And it's not like I can't even cheat my way into it. It is geo-blocked. It is IP blocked. It is like, even with the VPN, I can't get into it because they know who I am too much. So, there are already those kinds of things happening.
Right. Well, we probably will be diving a little bit more into it when we go into the panel. But thank you so much for your insights, Morten. If you can plug in that emoji that Morten is very fond of, please do. And I'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for being with us, Morten, for the time.
Thank you for having me.